Alissa Bell, welcome to the podcast. After many years of chatting about doing this, we're finally here. So welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here. It's kind of a funny full circle for me because I have been listening since pretty much the very beginning.
Yeah. I was hoping you could fill me in on and fill in the gaps of my poor memory. My memory is that you reached out to me very early on, like you definitely within the first year of podcasting. What do you remember? When did you reach out, and what was your initial offer? Because you offered to kind of help with the podcast behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very early on. I actually don't remember how I first found the podcast. That would be an interesting question, but I found you right as I was starting to transition from this international travel touring phase into more off pavement bike packing, and was trying to study up on that, and somehow found your podcast through that. And I also at the time was trying to fill the gaps. I'm sure we'll get into this, but I quit my job and was traveling, and during the time that I was home, I had time to work on things and was just trying to focus purely on things that were really interesting to me at that time, really use that time well. And so I thought this podcast is really cool. And I was at the time filling in my gaps with freelance website building to make some money in between trips. And at the time, I just thought I could easily donate some time to this awesome project, and it was kind of synergistic because I was just totally digging it. It was fueling my bike packing obsession as well, so it seemed kind of symbiotic. And I don't think I really expected any. I think I sent you an email just expecting it to go into the void, and I was pretty surprised when you wrote back immediately saying yes, definitely. The rest is history.
Yeah, a lot of emails do go into a void, and I would like to sincerely, and for probably the 100th, but not the last time, apologize to all those emails that I don't respond to. Because they are numerous. But your email, you were offering to help with something that is way outside of my just technical ability and comfort zone, my experience, which is kind of more on the technical website, the back end stuff. And I don't even know what the proper terms are. That's how ignorant I am. But I just wanted to take this chance to publicly thank you, because for anybody who doesn't know, and probably nobody knows, you're on the website, but you built the back end of bikesfordeath.com, and over the last 4 or 5 years, you've helped me maintain it. There's so many things about running a website that if no one's ever run one before, and myself included, you just don't realize our problems. There's so many errors that come up, and one day your website's down, you have no idea why, and it turns out a plugin wasn't refreshed, or I don't know, there's all kinds of things that creep up. And if you're running a website and you don't know the technical, have the technical ability to do anything about it, it's been it's just been, you've been amazing. You've been really helpful. And every time I need help, whether it's building a website or maintaining it, you've always been there to help me out. And I really appreciate that. It's a lot. So I wanted to just publicly thank you and give you a little bit of credit for all the work that you've done behind the scenes over here at Bikes for Death, because a lot of people won't be aware of that.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been really fun to work on.
Well, thank you. And through that, kind of, the last 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been, that's how I got to know you and was really keyed in on the amazing scope of trips that you've been on. And I've got somebody knocking on my door right now. Jesus Christ. Telemarketer. or house call marketer, whatever those people are
Oh
called.
my
You
God.
never get those anymore. I don't here in Texas. You never get
No,
those. That's so
no.
strange. Door-to-door salesman. Now that's a job. I would rather have my
Yes.
job than this job.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
all right. I've learned through that experience that you just have an incredible catalog of trips that you've been on all over the world. I think you've clocked in over 20,000 miles, again, from trips from overseas and quote unquote dangerous areas to doing bike pack racing here in the United States and kind of everything in between. And so I've been wanting to have you on the podcast for a long time, and I'm excited that we finally get a chance to do it. And just for fun, I'm going to ask you a fun question first. What is scarier, going on your first international trip or coming on the Bikes or Death podcast?
Podcast for sure.
Oh no. Well, we'll try to make it easy on you.
Yeah.
Why is this scarier, do you think, than going on? Because an international trip, like a solo international trip, that's daunting, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's not an entirely truthful answer, but I mean, there is something to the fact that like it's taken me years to finally do this, and that trip, I kind of jumped right into. But yeah, the first trip was for sure scary in its own ways.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about this, like, how do you calculate the 20,000 miles? Because that's a lot of miles. Are you calculating like just all the trips, and do you have it in Strava, or did you create an Excel spreadsheet? Like, how are you keeping track of that 20,000 number?
That's right.
And can I see your notes on it? I want to check your math. I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah. So I actually just have a Google sheet, like a spreadsheet. And after each trip, I mean, I just kind of know like roughly how many miles each trip was, whether like in the beginning I was, I think, keeping notes with I'm actually not on Strava. I use Ride with GPS a lot. In the beginning, I think I just had like a little bitty bike computer on my handlebars that, counted wheel revolutions basically. So I knew how many miles I rode each day, and I wrote it down at the end of the day. It's kind of like a trip journal, and then just put it into my spreadsheet. And so I have each and every bike packing or touring trip that I've ever done in there. The like loaded miles, not counting like day rides. Just add them up.
So have you been keeping a record since the beginning? Like, did you start that Google spreadsheet early on, or is it something that, after a few years in or something, you're like, I guess I should start like tallying this up?
I don't remember exactly. I think it was after like a few, like the first 2 or 3 bigger trips, actually. I mean, the first entry, I think, is literally like Southeast Asia, 3,000 miles. Okay. Like not super detailed, and, plus or minus however many miles on that 3,000. But since then, the trips have gotten shorter and a little more precise, and more often now I'm following routes, that already exist, and it's much easier to say like, 273 miles or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's evolved over time.
I just think it's cool. I never really thought of it before, but for some reason, whenever I was preparing for this interview, I that thought or idea just popped in my head, because I don't have anywhere close to 20,000. But the real answer is I have no idea how many, bike touring trips I've logged, like the mileage. I have no idea. And I wish that I had started counting like a long time ago, but it would be such a pain to go back.
The next best time is now.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I should start doing that. Yeah.
The other practical thing just to mention is it's actually really helpful, because these trips are what puts the most mileage on my bikes. And so at some point I started putting notes in there about like which bike and which parts, and like when I changed the chain, and it actually is like a bit of like a bike maintenance log to help me figure out how many miles I have on all my equipment.
Man, you are so detail oriented, so much more than I am. I wish I had, but that is a great idea, because like, like your chain, your bottom bracket, how old is it, knowing that information before you go on a long trip. You might want to change out a few things, just like even if they're fine, if I don't know how long a bottom bracket lasts but if hey, I got 10,000 miles on that bottom bracket, I'm about to go on a, 3-month long trip, might be a good idea to change that out. That's kind of the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's smart. Real smart. So before we kind of take a dive and start to unpack some of these 20,000 miles, give us an idea of like what your origin story is. How did you get into bike touring and bike packing and this kind of more adventurous life? Like, what was your origin story with all this?
Mm-hmm. It actually started, I came to bikes from the angle of travel, a little bit backwards from how probably many people do who are cyclists first and then figure out how to go for many days or weeks. I was working as a product manager in software. That was my original career. Did that for about 10 years. And at some point in my early 30s, kind of had like a quarter life crisis, I guess would be one way to call it. Just realized I had been very focused on like academic achievement. Basically, I was like a classic overachiever as a child, and then focused on my education, and then my career, and all of that just sort of blurred together. There was always the next step there, and that was like really interesting and rewarding for a while. But then it sort of seemed like I woke up one day in my early 30s, like, oh gosh, like what else is there? I mean, I was and still am happily married. I had a husband, we had a house, we didn't have kids, and it was sort of like, now's the time. I'm really familiar with this little bubble that I live in, which is the Silicon Valley software industry. But I felt very not confident about my ability to exist in the rest of the world, kind of. So I basically engineered my own little education program, essentially like a rite of passage almost. I quit my job and decided to travel to, I mean, if you're going to do that, like go big, right? So I chose one of the hardest places I could think of to travel, which was West Africa. Actually East Africa too. So I spent 5 months traveling in Africa, half in East and half in West, just backpacking around. I didn't really know much about bike travel at the time. And that trip was extremely eye-opening, obviously, life-changing, one could say. It just was, I mean, I'd traveled before, but that was the first time that I had really felt so immersed. Like it was a very interactive form of travel because nobody goes there. Like tourists don't go to Sierra Leone or Liberia on vacation. So when you show up there, everyone's pretty surprised, and the culture's fairly friendly and open. And at least in Sierra Leone and Liberia, people speak English. And so it was just one like long series of really interesting things happening, interesting interactions and serendipity. And I got kind of hooked on this form of travel that like feels very different from just kind of showing up with like a camera and a checklist and going to museums or whatever, which I had done before. I actually studied abroad in Italy when I was in college, so like I was familiar with that type of travel too, and that's great, but it just felt so different. And I finished that trip, and it's really a long way of leading into this, but
I like it. Yeah, it's good.
I can't quite remember how. I think I was just sort of into adventure stories, and I was reading adventure books, and some of those books were about people who adventured by bicycle. And at the time, I actually thought that was a little too crazy for someone like me. Like, oh, that sounds too hard. I couldn't do that. But when I finished that trip
Let
in
me pause
Africa.
you real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but like, what was it about the
Yeah.
bike travel that seemed scarier than backpacking? Because they seem kind of equal to me. You're exposed. You got to carry your own stuff, and they seem like they have a lot of similarities. So I'm curious. What was it about the bike travel in particular that seemed scary to you?
Yeah, it's a little hard to put myself like back in that place, right? Because now it seems seems so much more straightforward. But I think before I had spent all that time backpacking in West Africa, all of it seemed scary. And but at least backpacking is just like, yeah, you don't have to worry about the bike component. The public transportation there is kind of challenging on its own. It's like, it's like the 7-seater cars with like 14 people in them, and everything's pretty informal. And so that turned out to be a bit of a challenge in and of itself. But I wasn't, I wasn't a cyclist at the time. I think I had a bike, but I didn't really ride it very much. And that just seemed like this whole other foreign component.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Everybody knows how to walk, but not everybody, even if you know how to ride a bike, it's a big gap between, I can ride a bike to I'm going to travel by bike. And so, yeah, I guess that makes sense. If you're not already a cyclist, then it's going to feel more daunting for sure.
And I think I had the sense, that it was like more dangerous, especially for me as like a solo woman, which was something that, came up in a lot of these decisions, like the vulnerability of it. Now I don't actually feel that way about it anymore, but that was the sense I had at the time. It's like other people could do this by bike, but I probably shouldn't.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. Um, where was I going though?
You just said that at some point along the way you were like reading about adventuring and traveling, and you learned about, traveling by bike essentially.
Right. So, yeah, after coming home from that first non-bike trip, I think I had built up enough confidence to say, I think I want my next trip to be a bike trip, because what I was reading about in other people's, books and blogs mostly was the way that bike travel, uh, like you can go on a bike to places where lots of people come as tourists, but then still spend all your time in these sort of in between places that don't get as many tourists, and still like have these more I hesitate to use the word authentic because it's like so overused in the travel the travel space, right? But like, you're having interactions with people who are like genuinely surprised to see you there, and like want to talk, or it's just like easier to find your way into these sort of less predictable or serendipitous situations that I really enjoy. So yeah, with that in mind, I got a touring bike and bought a one-way ticket to Vietnam. And that was the first bike trip.
Oh, wow. How long did that one last?
And that one was 3 months. And it was fairly open-ended at the time. I don't think I knew even exactly how long it was going to be. It was a one-way ticket to Vietnam with the intention of riding through Southeast Asia. Kind of made the route up as I went, and it just kind of like naturally, resolved after 3 months. It's like, I think I've seen what I wanted to see, and spent the time I wanted to spend, and it's time to go home. But it was pretty open-ended in the beginning.
Wow. That is, I always want to use the word crazy, and I really need to, maybe I'll say wild. That's wild, but I don't like the word crazy because I don't think it's crazy. I think it's uncommon, for sure, to quit your job, to put your career on hold, and to then decide that you want to travel, and then like go on an open-ended trip to Vietnam. Like, that is just outside most people's like rationale of like how they're gonna go about their day, their life, their 3 month, like whatever. I mean, it's just so far outside the norm.
Yeah, and I feel very fortunate to have had that kind of flexibility. I mean, it's always been an interesting trade-off, because what I read about and, in the stories before I started and what I dreamed about was one of those really open-ended trips that people take where they, leave everything behind and go bike around the world for a year or two. Like that kind of open-endedness really appealed to me. I actually sort of proposed that to my husband if he wanted to, to do that together. And interestingly, he didn't, frankly. I mean, he loves his career. He works in tech. He does computer science and software, and that is his passion. And I was in a place where I wanted a break from my career and to explore other things, but he was not. And so it was kind of like, well, that kind of really long trip is not quite on the table without some major, adjustments in life that weren't worth the cost. So, but he was actually, I think, the first to say, well, why don't you go do some stuff on your own? And I don't think that had maybe even really occurred to me, like back to this idea that it wouldn't be safe for me as a woman or things like that. So, once he said that, I really got to thinking, and that was kind of the start of the whole thing. So that 3-month trip was sort of an attempt to recreate that feeling of open-endedness, but in a shorter time period, basically.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could go back and re-remember, maybe but like, do you know what you were looking for or seeking? Like you weren't getting it from your job anymore and you wanted to go see and do. Do you remember like what it was that was really kind of the main motivator or driver in tackling, these are, not short weekend trips. I mean, these are big trips that come with negotiations with your husband and leaving your husband and your life and, quitting your job and going to a foreign land and a foreign place where you don't speak the language. And I mean, I could go on and on and on and on, right? Like, so there had to be something really big that's kind of driving that progression in your life. Can you speak to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, at the time, it was hard to get perspective. At the time, it just felt like this overpowering, like obsession, right? I don't know how, like, I was just reading all the stories. I really wanted some of that, And I think at the time, it felt a lot like curiosity. Like I just really want to know what else is out there and explore more of the world. Like I wasn't particularly well traveled as a kid. I didn't leave the US until like age 21, which is, not bad certainly, but also like did, have a lot of experience with that. And just this idea that like the rest of the world is real, like everywhere is someone's home. And there's so many different ways to do it. I thought that was really fascinating and wanted to explore it. I think in hindsight, the actual driver was like a shift in identity that there was like an identity in me that was sort of wanting to come out. Like a few years before that, I got really into trail ultra running, sort of discovered my interest in like pushing my comfort zone there, and this frankly kind of just a more adventurous identity for like a nerdy little kid, from a shelter family. I think I just had this sense that like I really wanted there to be more in there when it came to my identity. And I just felt this like overwhelming drive to become the type of person who did these things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that speaks to a lot of people. I mean, I don't know if it's something we can easily pinpoint, but I think this audience will be very receptive to the idea that, man, we just want to get out there. We want to see it all. We want to do it. We want to find ourselves. Like, we want to learn how capable we are. Like, I mean, there's so many, things that can be attached to one. I don't think it's like one thing, right? It's like a lot of things that probably give us that push to go and find out, and it's just interesting. Like, I think that like what you have done is something that a lot of people dream about doing or think about doing or entertain the idea of, hey, maybe I could put my career on hold and go and do X, Y, or Z, right? Like that, I think that thought process is something we can all identify with, but like not many people do it, you know? And I guess I'm kind of curious, like, what has it been like? Like, are you glad that you made that decision? Has it been worth it? You know, is the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak, right? Like, how has that been, you know? Because it sounds like rainbows,
Mhm.
right? But the reality is like, you know, you have a home life, you have a house, you have a husband, you have friends and all this stuff back at home. So it's not like oh, I just went and had this amazing trip and that's a insulated experience. Like that experience is happening while the rest of the world is also taking place. And it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? So like, what is it? What is that lifestyle like in reality? Like, how has it been for you?
Yes, that is such a good question, with many answers. So, yes, I mean decisions all have consequences, right? And there's an opportunity cost. Like every time I go do something, there's something else that I'm not doing, which became very clear to me as I was like living this lifestyle where I'm alternating back and forth, back and forth. So I'm constantly like realizing what I'm putting on hold to go do the other thing that I want to do. I would say the temporary retirement hasn't worked out exactly how I had planned. So I thought I would go back, right? So this was in 2018. And I was fortunate to just be interested in tech, right? Which is a field that pays pretty well. So I'd just been working for 10 years and, you know, saving up. And I had a buffer that was like enough to allow me to say I could take maybe like a year off and, you know, do some stuff and then come back to this line of work and everything will probably be fine. I will say it has worked out. I mean, first of all, yes, I would do it again. Like absolutely. The person it's allowed me to become feels much closer to who I actually am than I did back then. And like, that's worth a lot to me. So absolutely, I would do it again. But it's not a decision to be made lightly for sure. I mean, there's the financial aspect and that it's hard to speak to that because everyone's in such a different place. And like, I have a privileged background in the sense that I had a lot of opportunities as a kid and a good education and, you know, a good job and all of that. So that has to be said, but so that makes it like much safer to make this decision. I think there's like less to lose, but at the same time, like things have evolved in ways that I didn't quite expect. Like I never did go back to that normal job because in between my trips, I was like putting the pieces together with consulting and freelancing, and then eventually building my own websites and starting my own projects. And once you're used to that kind of autonomy, it gets hard to go back to like a regular office job. So that's something I've been trying to avoid. But also it's like a pretty tough way to piece together a living. It's pretty unpredictable. There have been ups and downs. And like actually last year, things were really up. And then like actually just over the last 6 months or so, Google's been making a lot of changes with their algorithms and my projects are like not as successful all of a sudden pretty much overnight. So I actually don't know how the story ends yet. I don't know if the next move is back to a real job or not. Still figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how many people in the audience can relate to what you just said, but I can relate to that on a high level as a person who, I mean, I've been doing Bikes for Death for 5 years. I made the switch to do this full time last year, and the amount of stress and anxiety and uncertainty that comes with the freedom of being able to kind of make your own schedule and plan your own day and go on a trip when you want to. I have kids, so I have a limiting factor that doesn't change, but still, you know, I have more freedoms for sure than if I had a 9-to-5 job with a 401k and the health insurance and the retirement fund and all those things, right? So It's a battle that I am facing on a daily, minute by minute basis, and it's just full of stress and anxiety. But, on the flip side, the idea of going back and working at a, quote unquote corporate job or 9 to 5 also comes with it a huge amount of stress and anxiety and disappointment and, kind of like sadness for me. Like I would be kind of depressed and not the happiest version of myself. And I think that's a good thing to touch on for people to understand is like these decisions, these lifestyle choices come with pros and cons, and you really just kind of have to pick like which one do you want? Do you want the safety and security and comfort that comes from having that guaranteed job with an income and all the things I just said? Or are you going to trade that for the uncertainty and freedom that comes with having a different and more adventurous life per se, and being an entrepreneur and self-employed, so yeah. Anything else on that?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. It's like you're choosing like, which basket you want, but each basket has like some great stuff and some challenges, and you can't really separate it out. So yeah, like the first year or two was like bliss, right? I was so excited and felt so confident and capable. But then, eventually like the trade-offs start to set in. You realize you have to work with what you've chosen, and it's still great. Like I still think I would do it again. But yeah, it's not all roses and sunshine or whatever.
Yeah, rainbows and sunshine. Well, it's good. Has it here? So, final question on this topic, and I think the answer is obvious. But is it worth it to you? Is the stress and anxiety, uncertainty, and everything of not having that? Is it worth the pursuit? Is the juice worth the squeeze? As I said. For you?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I can't really imagine like what life would be like if I had just stayed at that job or another similar job. I don't think I would be very happy right now. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's dig into some of your bike touring. So your first trip was to Africa. You said West or East Africa?
Yeah, well, so that one was pre-bike, just to be clear. But
right, your first bike trip was Vietnam.
I did eventually go back to Africa with my bike, but the first bike tour was Southeast Asia.
Okay, so why did you pick that? Like, yeah, what was your thought process, and maybe just in general, like, what is your thought process for how do you pick where you're going to go? Like, what speaks to you and grabs you and say, okay, now I'm going to invest all this time and money and time away from home and all this stuff. Like, this is the place. Like, what is your thought process when you're going through that, and why did you land on Southeast Asia?
Yeah, well, I learned pretty quickly that it changes after each trip. So I learned to like not be too rigid about having kind of like a checklist, and then just do the next one. Like each time I get home from a trip, I sort of reassess what I'm looking for more of or less of. But the first one, Southeast Asia, I think I chose because it was the right balance of like unfamiliar, but also not too challenging logistically. So Southeast Asia is a pretty popular place for backpackers. There is tourist infrastructure, more or less, at least in all the major towns. It's also really cheap, or at least it was back then. So, like, for example, I didn't camp much, if at all, on that trip, actually. I carried a little tent, but like most nights paid like $6 for a room at a guest house or something like that. So the difficulty level was sort of like just in that sweet spot for me, where it was different enough from home, sort of culturally and in terms of, I don't know, the climate and the terrain, just everything was going to be different enough to be interesting, but manageable enough for a first trip, I thought.
How, you mentioned you came into the world or the cycling travel by bike world by way of just traveling and backpacking. what did you do to prepare for, and this was your first one. I mean, that's good. Did you go on like some just overnighters to test it? Like, what did you do to prepare yourself to travel by bike, and how prepared were you like going into this thing?
I don't think I went on any overnighters with that bike. I had like a couple years, 2 or 3 years prior, I had done like a couple little overnighters near home where I just like literally just wore like a 40-liter backpack and like strapped a tent to the handlebars and just like rode to a campsite. I honestly didn't even know that that was a thing. Like I thought I made it up. So I don't even call it like bike touring because it was just like a fun experiment. So I had overnighted by bike like once or twice. But for that particular trip, no, I don't think I did any test trips. I bought the bike. I bought some panniers. I did a lot of reading. And then I got on the plane, and that was kind of just the strategy was just get there, and then you're stuck. Wow. And you'll figure everything else out.
Wow. Well, I mean, did you have any fears and doubts? Like, did you go into that trip just pretty confident, maybe confident through ignorance or, unfamiliarity, but like, where were you at with like your own level of like confidence going into that trip?
I don't think I was confident. I don't know. It's a weird mix. I think I was pretty scared. But I think I must have had a sense that I could do it. Otherwise I wouldn't have, put myself in that situation. I'm actually fairly risk averse. People don't get this sometimes from just looking at like what I've done, but not a thrill seeker. I tend towards the anxious side basically. And so I think it's almost more of like a desire to not let that hold me back. Like if I find something really cool that really interests me, captures my imagination, and I feel scared of it, and I'm able to like objectively decide that it's not actually that dangerous, then it's almost like I can't back down. It's like a dare, It's like, well, I have to do this because otherwise I would be making the choice to let fear hold me back from doing something that I think is interesting and objectively not that dangerous. So I think it was just like squarely in that bucket where like I just had to do it. I had to do it, but I didn't. Yeah, I didn't. I think I was concerned about like bike repair stuff. I had never fixed a flat at that point. I had like installed a new tube and tire in my living room, so I sort of knew how that worked, but that was the extent of it. And I wasn't sure about the language, and I don't know. I think really just because I had read so many stories of other people who also had no idea what they were doing, but did it anyway, and it somehow always worked out often in like the most delightful ways. I just sort of had to hope that the same thing would happen to me.
That isn't. I'm going to push back slightly because that answer doesn't quite elevate to the status of like minimizing the fears and anxieties. Like, oh, I'll just hope it works out. It works out for other people, but so is that what it was? Like you felt at peace because you had collected enough stories to make you feel confident enough that it would also work out for you?
Well, I wouldn't say I felt at peace. I would say I was very scared and but just extremely stubborn. Like I wanted this for myself so badly that I wanted to make it happen. And yes, the stories from other people were what allowed me to feel like it wasn't insane or super dangerous. Like what allowed me to feel that I could take the leap and I wouldn't, die basically, like that it was going to be okay. I don't know, most likely. Yeah.
Most likely. So what are you trying to overcome through that process? Like you talked about not being a victim to your own fear. Like you're like, I want it so badly. When you say I want it so badly, what is the it in that sentence? Is it not being a victim to that fear that we all have? Or is it something else? Or is that part of the story?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it for sure. Like the desire to not let fear hold me back from having an interesting life, because I've only got one, right? And I want to use it well, and do interesting things. And so I've become very stubborn for sure about not letting fear hold me back. But, of course, anyone who's into this knows that that's not all it is, right? There's that feeling of curiosity about new places, wanting to just understand more about the world that we live in, the sense of freedom that comes with that kind of adventure, like I'm just going to go by myself to do this thing, and don't have to coordinate with anyone or negotiate with anyone. Like this is, my thing, and I get to see where it leads. That part was exciting. And I think, just a sense of like capability in the world. I don't know if this resonates with everyone, but I feel like maybe partly as a woman, or maybe just kind of the childhood that I had, comfortable and a bit sheltered. I just like wanted to have a sense that I could function in the world in a broader sense, like outside of the bubble that I was used to.
Yeah. I mean, that speaks to me. I was way more sheltered. I didn't go on my first international trip until I think it was 40, maybe 39. I mean, it's been within the last... Oh, wait, no. I'm 44. Fuck. I'm way older than I thought. God damn it. That's so funny.
Hate it when that happens.
I'm at that age where you really want to be like, no, I'm definitely still 40. Yeah, no, it would have been like 42 or 43 when Natalie and I went on. She was the person who introduced me to international travel. And I grew up extremely sheltered, mostly from like a religious standpoint. It's like everything was just so centralized on religion that there wasn't room for exploring this beautiful world that we live in. Like that doesn't matter. What matters is heaven and what comes after this world. And that's where the emphasis and priority was put in, in my growing up. And so like, I went from that to, wanting to see the United States. Like I was just like, oh, I want to get out and explore, United States. I'm like, wow, it's huge. And that was my big, transition, was just going from a very sheltered, like religious life to, oh, there's this big United States that I can explore. And then Natalie opened my eyes to international travel. And that's really, broadened my own desire, I think is the word, and like my own goals for myself. And like I want to be a part of this world and like understand this world in a real way, like in a real and meaningful way. Like I don't want to just read an article about a place. I want to listen to you talk about it, and then I want to go like find out for myself. And I don't know exactly I think there's just so much growth that happens there inside yourself, and then also like a growth of like your perspective and understanding of the world that we live in, and those things just have so much value to me in my life, so I don't know if that resonates with you. But
yeah, absolutely. I kind of this is getting a bit broad maybe, but I feel like a lot of the problems going on in the world could be eased if more people had the experience of like coming face to face with a lot of people from different cultures. That's a really broad statement. But like every time I go to one of these other unfamiliar countries and spend some time there on my bike, like I get confused. People act in ways that seem odd or that I don't understand, or I have to adjust. And like that process of coming face to face with a different culture and then sort of gradually figuring out, oh, like there are other ways to do this thing that I've always done a certain way, or there are other ways to, other perspectives on like some of the most core parts of culture. It just like broadens my sense of what it means to be a human, right? Like there isn't just one right way to think about things or see things. And yeah, I feel like that's just a really valuable skill that it would be nice if more people had the opportunity to realize.
or took the opportunity, like, I could not agree more. I think that, traveling internationally in particular, and even traveling to another state, I mean, we get so caught in our little like bubbles of like, oh, well, I'm not going to name a state, but well, I'll say Texans, because Texan, I am a Texan, but like people like just have lots of opinions about Texas, for example, and what Texans are like, and I've been really edified through hosting my own events through the the Texas Showdown series, and introducing people from all over the world, international travelers, other people from the United States coming to Texas. And I have heard limitless times that it was such a great experience. It was so far different than what they expected, and it was wonderful. And every single person that has had that experience now has a broader and more intimate understanding of Texas. It doesn't represent everyone, but it's a little bit closer to being able to have your own experiences that can inform your understanding of the world. And the more that you like have an experience where you're like, oh, I thought this about Texas and Texans and all of them, and then you go and you have an experience that's contrary to that, it opens up a crack in your mind where you're like, okay, well, what other, ideas or thoughts or beliefs that I have about people in Vietnam that are also not correct, And so like, I am strongly in that camp, and I will advocate for travel as a way to create a better world, create better people that are a little bit more open-minded and understanding, and have like real perspectives that they've gained through intimate interactions with locals in different parts of the world. Like, that has so much value in my life, and I can't see how it, doesn't have ripple effects,
Yes, very well said.
Thank you.
Totally agree.
Let's talk about some of the things that are like barriers. I mean, I'm curious for you. You've done a lot of your travel. Sometimes your husband goes with you. We haven't talked about that yet, but I know that sometimes your husband goes with y'all and y'all do trips together. But a lot of your stuff you've done solo. What has been the reaction from your friends and family? Like, what are some of the things that you hear from people when you say, I'm going to go to Southeast Asia for 3 months on a bike, kind of open-ended. I've never ridden a bike before too much. I'm just going to kind of wing it and hope for the best. I've heard other people have done it well. So like, what has been some of the fodder and feedback you've got from people in your life?
The people in my life the people in my life don't know anyone else who does this. So in the very beginning, I think most of them thought it was pretty weird. Friends I have who aren't into this scene at all just sort of say, oh, interesting, cool, good luck, and then ask questions about it later. That they've been supportive. The hardest one, I think, was my parents. I've got a mom especially who likes to worry about me and make sure that I'm safe, and she's also really not into travel herself. She's more of like a nester than an adventurer, and so she was quite concerned. So it's been a bit of a process of like educating her about like, no, this isn't that crazy, it's not that bad. It's all going to be fine. And my husband, Ethan, I think like we've been each other's adventure buddies for long enough. We were doing trail and ultra running together and traveled together. And I think he knows, he trusts my ability to get myself in, just far enough, but not too far, not too far over my head. And he knows that I'll make good decisions. So he's been supportive too. Actually, the people in my life have been pretty good about it. It's more like the random strangers that I meet along the way who are like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are all these fears, the fears that I think are born from unknown, like people that really don't know are going to fearmonger a little bit. And it just comes from a place of probably caring from you in a weird way, of trying to shelter you from, dangerous or scary things. how have what things do you do to mitigate risk while traveling? Are there things that you like, rules that you have, or strategies that you have to try to mitigate any risk that, I mean, there's risk everywhere you go. That's the thing, is like, you're never going to get away from risk. You're never going to get away from danger. It doesn't matter if you're like driving through your neighborhood or riding your bike through Sudan. Like, there's things that are always going to be there. But are there things on a bike trip that you do to mitigate risk?
Mm-hmm. That's such a good question. Well, I've always felt that the biggest source of risk on most bike trips is motor vehicles, unfortunately. So, and that one like doesn't discriminate based on gender or whether you're alone or anything like that. So I feel the number one thing I can do to make sure I have a good trip is to be careful about that. So that's all the usual, right colors and lights and awareness and all that, route choice. But probably what you're actually asking about is more, I guess, the people side of things. I mean, honestly, people are like they're like simultaneously the thing I sort of worry about most, but also the thing that I think is probably least likely to be the real problem, right? So traffic safety, if I'm like bike packing somewhere remote alone and it's hot, my biggest concern is usually water, or like things like that where you can sort of get yourself in trouble pretty quickly. But yeah, when it comes to people, I've done all the things you're not supposed to do, right? I've, hitchhiked and gotten in cars with people and stayed overnight in people's houses. And like, I just, I trust my gut to some extent, although that's kind of cliche. I sort of hate it when people talk about that. I think like I'm careful about getting into someone's personal, into their car or their home until I've spent some time talking to them. So if someone says, hey, like, let me give you a ride, the road's out up ahead or whatever, like I'll just kind of strike up a conversation, chat with them for a while first, and try to feel it out. Try not to give super specific information about where I'm going or camping. If I'm wild camp, I'm actually pretty careful about wild camping where I'll do it. I don't like to be in sight of the road, so I'll sneak off somewhere hidden. But yeah, it's a bad night's sleep for me if I'm visible from the road. Those are just a few things off the top of my head.
How are you communicating with people in general? Because I assume you don't speak Vietnamese.
Yeah, well, this is a really interesting one that I kind of wish everyone would know. So, I don't think language is a very big factor when it comes to international bike travel. At least not as big as most people think. So, I've traveled in all sorts of places where I did not speak, like I don't speak Vietnamese. I was in Laos and Cambodia, and I don't speak Arabic in Sudan. I don't speak French, and I speak a little teeny bit of French, but anyway, tons of places where the only way that I can actually speak with people is if someone local happens to speak some good English, right? And I'll make an effort to like learn some words because that's always fun and like local people appreciate it, but I don't count on being able to communicate for my basic needs. And I would say actually traveling on a bike is like one of the easier ways to travel when you don't speak the language, because first of all, when you're just sort of backpacking or taking public transport, like a large part of your mission is to like figure out transportation to the next place. And if you have your own transportation, that actually makes things quite a bit easier. But also when you show up on a bicycle, like people sort of intuitively understand what you need, right? So like with some very basic hand signals, so you can easily communicate water, food, place to sleep, which direction you're coming from or going, like is the road ahead like really steep and hilly, or is it flat, or like there's just an awful lot of communication that is surprisingly intuitive for the basics. And then of course there's always Google Translate app for the for the more complex stuff if you really need it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been woefully impressed with Google Translate. For people who haven't used it. It is incredibly good. You can take a picture of a menu, or, you just kind of scan a menu and it'll convert the entire menu into English, or any language that you want. And so then they come and you just point to it. You can talk into it, and it'll translate back, into whatever language, or you can record what somebody else is saying and it'll translate it. Like, it is such a robust and very good app, that I think, if anyone spent some time with it prior to traveling into a foreign language territory, like, it actually is a very good tool. Would you echo that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not perfect. Like, it definitely could lead to some amusing, like, just like we can't figure this out kind of situation. But yeah, in like, especially in like in Central Asia, where we don't even really read the alphabet, like, it was super helpful for translating signs and menus and things. And then the audio, yeah, I had conversations like in Sudan once with a family. It was kind of like pulled me off the road for a tea break. It was like this whole family of like 15 people. It's like basically in a hut in the desert. But the sort of head of the household had a smartphone with Google Translate, and we managed to have a little back and forth, very low bandwidth conversation about who's from where and how many kids everyone has, and all the standard things that they like to ask travelers there. So yeah, it's a great tool. And there are increasingly more languages that keep adding them, where you can essentially download the dictionary for offline use, which is super helpful for like traveling too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's huge. How did that first trip go? Yeah, you went in, I mean, obviously prepared from being like, you were a traveler, backpacker, so you had a lot of experience, but the bike was kind of unfamiliar territory. It's your first, long bike tour. How did it go? Obviously you kept doing it, so it didn't discourage you, but what was your overall like takeaway from that experience?
Yeah, it was great. It totally hooked me. I mean, it was in the beginning, it was really hard. Northern Vietnam is very hilly. For people who don't know, it was maybe not the smartest place to start, but it's beautiful. It's just like these green mountains and cliffs everywhere, and gorgeous. And then Laos was kind of chill. I followed some like dirt roads along the Mekong River there for quite a while, and made stops in some of the like the backpacker towns, and saw the little they don't have any big cities there, but like small cities. And there was a festival of lights there in one of them, which is really cool. I spent a few extra days there, so kind of played backpacker for a few days here and there. And then into Cambodia was actually probably the most challenging part, because mainly because the roads just aren't they're pretty busy. Like, you don't have many choices. It's just a lot of like highways across the country, and the shoulders aren't good, and they're always under construction. And there's also just like less tourism there in general, which is both good and bad. But that one was probably the most interesting part. And then sort of a mad dash through part of Thailand to get to Bangkok, which I don't really recommend anyone ride a bike into Bangkok. It's a little sketchy and busy.
There's traffic.
But yeah, it's just like this very large area of suburbs and then city, and a lot of trucks, and the roads are kind of crazy. It's just doesn't feel like a very safe place to be on a bike just because of the traffic. But yeah, rode into the airport there, and I think just felt like I'd done it, conquered the fear and had a good trip, and was very happy with it, ready to go home and plan the next one.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had another thought that I had is, you're out there for 3 months. What about boredom? Did you get bored, or your personality type, does this is just like very well suited for you. But yeah, I'm curious, like, I mean, lonely, away from all your friends and family, not speaking the language, like just feeling like displaced in a lot of ways. Did you experience any of that, or did you just soak it all in? Like, what was that like for you?
I think in the beginning, it was just all so exciting that I didn't feel boredom. I'm pretty introverted. I can do okay on my own for pretty long periods of time. So I actually don't recall feeling that lonely or homesick, which might seem strange to some people, but that's just me. Um, yeah, I think I do remember like not having people to talk to in English was kind of an issue. And so, every few days or week when I did meet other travelers or a local who spoke English, suddenly I turned into, a surprisingly extroverted person that was excited to talk with them for a while, but it's kind of fun, right? Like that's part of the fun is to like discover new aspects of yourself out there when you're not really like constrained by familiar people or environments. So yeah, that was fun. I don't
they don't know you.
remember.
They don't know you're an introvert. They don't
Exactly.
know that this is your first bike tour. Like they don't know anything. So there's a freedom in that
Exactly.
yeah.
For sure. Yeah, the freedom of like like who are you going to be out there? Like no one in the whole country knows me. I can be
Yeah.
whoever I want. Yeah. So I don't remember it being a big deal. At this point, I do sometimes encounter boredom on my bike trips and I listen to audiobooks and podcasts and things like that to kind of nurture that other side of my brain. But back then, I think I was just kind of taking it all in.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine your first one. You're just, and I mean, everything's new. And so, I mean, it's sensory overload. Our brains are pattern recognition machines, right? And so in your home environment, it's already processed all these patterns, the food, the language, the money system, like all of it, right? Like our brain has a pattern for that. But when you go somewhere new, everything is different. And so your brain is probably just, shooting off flares with excitement. So it makes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
All right. So let's skip ahead a little bit. That trip went well. It lit a fire. And since then, you've been on an absolute tear. Can you surmise maybe all or like the biggest trips you've gone on since then, just to kind of stack your resume, so to capture that?
Yes. Okay. So the very next one actually was sort of an anomaly for me. I actually had a friend we were coworkers at the time, and she was also interested in this, and we did a 2-week trip on the Carretera Austral in Chile together, which was like one of the few times I've been able to ride with a friend still, which was fantastic. It's gorgeous down there. She had to go home to go back to work, and I spent to be clear, this was after I had quit, so we were former coworkers. She was still working there. She went home to work. I got to stay because I was temporarily retired, and did some more riding in southern Argentina and Chile. So that was number 2. And then while I was down there, I think while I was like riding solo through the windy southern Patagonian plains and just like feeling kind of excited about the freedom of it all, I heard about this race across the US. So most people may be familiar with the Trans Am bike race, but they actually that year for the first time released a sister route. It's called Bike Nonstop US. Which is like less well known, but I think you've had some people on here before who've talked about it. It was supposed to be a lower traffic route across the country. And this really caught my attention because I was getting into bike travel. The question came up, like, should I bike travel in my own country, the US? I probably should. That would be cool. But also, like, so many routes, so little time. Like, I don't know if I want to spend 3 months or 4 months or whatever doing that. But like, here's this race where the goal is to kind of do it quickly, like efficiently. And I think that appealed in part to my bike travel aspirations, but then also to the part of me who had previously been running ultras and like being a little bit competitive in my outdoor pursuits. And while I was still in Patagonia, I signed up for that, and ended up riding that, the back of the pack 30-day finish, coast to coast. And so that was kind of this introduction to both riding in the US and this idea of racing. And then also at the same time, like really impressed upon me how much I dislike riding with cars on roads. And that turned out to be like mentally the hardest part of that for me was just being on paved roads with traffic like all day, every day for a month, in kind of like a vulnerable, sleep deprived, tired state. It just wore me down. So that was the moment that I discovered bike packing. Like, oh, people are doing this, but like sometimes shorter distances and off paved roads largely. And I remember making a conscious decision, like if I want to extend my, my life expectancy statistically, like I should pivot to this. So I started, that was when I started doing like more bike packing races in the US or just some shorter routes on my own. In the middle of that, I did go back to touring briefly, like in early 2020, right before the pandemic. I was in Egypt and Sudan, doing more of like with my touring bike and my panniers, doing more of a road tour. And that was a really interesting trip for sure. But then pandemic happened, no more international travel for quite some time. And over the last few years, I've done more riding in the US. Did the Great Divide one summer, just as a tour, part of the Western Wildlands over a month. And then a couple international trips with my husband over the past few years. So we went to Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan for a month on bikes, which was incredible. Highly recommend that one. And then Morocco and Portugal.
Amazing.
Those are kind of the big ones.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's perfect. So like, I'm curious to just get your own personal experience between like the enjoyment, the value of the different types of traveling by bike, bike touring abroad versus, bike pack racing or just bike packing trips in the United States. It's something I'm curious about, like, do you find the same level of satisfaction and enjoyment from doing the bike packing in the United States, or are you looking for, do they each have their own place and you want to continue to do both of them,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one of the things that I have learned is that they are all different to me. They each offer different things and have different challenges, and I should be intentional with which ones I choose based on what I'm actually like looking to experience. So I feel that the international trips, especially if you choose somewhere sufficiently different from home, right? Those are just almost like a thing in and of themselves. Like I still don't think of those about biking as much as I do about travel, about like the experience of putting myself in an unfamiliar culture. And biking is just kind of like the way that I move around while I'm there. I think it's different, like Portugal, for example, when I was there with Ethan, like that was an interesting case because it is international, but it's like, it feels quite familiar, especially like to a Californian on the coast here. It almost felt like vacation, it's like just riding from restaurant to restaurant. And it was fun for like a week, but then I actually got bored, whereas like we were in Morocco the month before and I found that really fascinating and rewarding. So I think if I'm going to go abroad, my preference is for places that are just really different, like that kind of disorienting, like trippy feeling of like, oh, now I have to figure out how this place works. I'm
smiling because Natalie is going to love that you just said that. That is exactly what she, like, what I'm not, yeah. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to go to this place. And she's like, it's too much like America. She's like, if I'm going to go, to do a trip, and there's so much expense and all these things. So you have to really decide what's important to you. But it's the culture shock, the unfamiliarity, the just you almost want the extreme version of it, if you're going to go, not for everybody, but for some people, and I agree too. But yeah, that's something she's always talked about and kind of like really put in my head. It's like, no, I mean, if you're going to, take a week off and, and all these sacrifices and money and all this stuff, like go for the big one, go for the real experience that's going to really displace you from your comfort zone and put you in unfamiliar territories and really give you like a more, because I don't want to diss like the other places, but it's just it like hits a little bit harder when there's so many of these other factors that you're negotiating. The culture seems even bigger because there's so much of it that is just unfamiliar to you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think for me, I'm that way too. I kind of want like the more intense version if I'm gonna go outside the US. But within the US, I mean, there's also culture shock to be found within the US. It's not quite as intense, but like I always say, I learned more about my own country by riding my bike across it than I had just living in California for decades. So that's definitely worth doing. I think I've had that experience. I think when I think about like bike packing trips in the US, so like the Great Divide or Western Wildlands or shorter routes, it feels almost more to me like backpacking or hiking in that sense, that like what I'm looking for there is really more of a like an outdoor like wilderness, like not in the literal sense because bikes can't go in wilderness designated wildernesses, but like being outdoors in a peaceful place and moving through it. It feels more like outdoor adventure as opposed to travel.
Yeah.
And then within that, there's like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to agree that that's such a good distinction, and it's one of the things that America has, and kind of like one of our national treasures is our outdoor space. We have a lot of land, and so it makes it easier to like have those like more outdoor adventurous experiences here. But then like, yeah, bike touring or going international, for me, I want to taste the food. I want to meet the people. I want to see them dancing in the, town square and, whatever the case may be. Like you don't want to be out in the wilderness because you're missing all of the cultural stuff. So I just liked what you said. Yeah, that distinction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I was just going to subdivide further, like as far as the US riding, the racing versus touring, because I have gotten a little bit into racing slowly. But that becomes more of like an endurance effort, like a mental challenge, limit pushing type of exercise, as opposed to like sometimes when I just go bike packing, normally it's like a relaxing little getaway for me these days. I mean, I know it's not always like, it wouldn't have been that way in the beginning when I didn't have as much experience, but it's like fairly straightforward at this point to just like go out to the woods for a few days and bike pack. And I actually consider that like a relaxing vacation. So, picking the intention and the goals for each trip, I think is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to skip ahead to, we have so much stuff to talk about. I told you I over prepared for this episode, so I always do. And that's why my podcast can sometimes run long. How are you doing for time?
I'm fine on time, except I might ask for a bathroom break.
Me too. I might ask for a bathroom break too. I was thinking the same thing. Okay. Do you want to pause now and take one real quick?
Sure.
All right. I'll meet you back here.
Okay. Okay.
I was so perplexed for a little while. Your bike behind you is set up on a trainer, and I saw it like if you look at it from, I don't know if you can see my perspective, but like it looks like it's a tiny wheel in the back, and I'm like, what is that tiny wheel? And then I realized it's like the Wahoo kicker thing.
Oh yeah. That's the original. That's the touring bike that came to Southeast Asia and North Africa and all of that. She's kind of sad on the trainer now, but I don't ride that bike as much other places anymore. So it works out.
Yeah. I'm gonna guess surly long haul trucker.
That's right.
Oh,
You got it.
it's the go-to for all first-time international travel. I mean, it's a tried and true. It's a great. I've never owned one, but from all accounts, it's a great bike.
Yeah,
All
it's a
right.
great bike. Super reliable. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I normally on the podcast, I want to dig into all these trips in very great detail, but for today's episode, you're a unique guest because you have taken, the experience from, years and miles and all these different places that we were talking about, and you've started to compile it into helpful information for other people by way of a website that you own and manage called exploringwild.com. You also have another project called bikesleepbike.com. And so I wanted to kind of, a couple things. One, turn people's attention to this as being a great resource. Like, I cannot overstate how much great information that you have compiled onto your website and made it available for free to the wide world web, whatever. And so, I mean, one, just as a way to kind of highlight this as a resource, and then also to just pick your brain and kind of talk about a variety of topics in the bike packing and bike touring space. I mean, there's no way we have time to, tackle all of them. But yeah, I wanted to dive into a few. So I think just as a starting point, why don't you introduce what Exploring Wild is? Why did you start it? What your goals are for it? I mean, just kind of give us a introduction to what Exploring Wild is.
Yeah. So I describe it as like a travel blog that got out of hand, basically. Like
I love that.
I actually started it like with no intention of it going anywhere near where it is today. I started it after coming back from that first trip in East and West Africa, before bikes even entered my life, because, well, two reasons. One, like, just no one travels to West Africa, and I felt like I had some on the ground knowledge there that would benefit other travelers, and I just wanted to put it out there so that other people could benefit from it. And I wanted to just like share. It's a very sort of poorly understood part of the world, especially for us Americans. There's a lot of negative stereotypes about some of these places, and they have had some really rough histories with like civil war and political unrest and stuff. But when I went to there, Liberia, Sierra Leone, etc., I had really good experiences with the people there. They were very kind to me, and the culture was really welcoming and interesting. So I wanted to sort of share that positive side of things. And building websites was something that I had an interest in. Thought it would be just like a fun little project, put something out there. And when I went on my first bike tour, I continued it because basically we talked about this before, like a lot of my what little confidence that I had in the beginning that I could do this came from reading other people's blogs, especially women, because I had the sense that like, oh, maybe guys can do this. But for me, unfortunately, it's just not a good idea, right? And only when I found other women's blogs and trip reports did I start to change that idea. And I'm so thankful that I came across those, because they really, laid the groundwork for everything. So I thought it would be neat to kind of like pay that forward and add my voice to that. And then back then things were a little different with the online landscape. You could kind of just like write things and people, you could get traffic to it, and people started showing up to the bike content, and I started writing more about my gear and how I was packing things. And sort of when I got into bike packing, I started writing about how I was doing that with sort of my old touring bike and saving money on gear and how to bike pack on a budget. And like people started showing up for all this. So anyway, it's evolved to the point where today Exploring Wild is an informational website about primarily bikepacking is the strongest right now. There's also quite a bit of backpacking and long distance hiking stuff on there. And then even the the old travel stuff is still buried in there as well. So I try to make it an informational resource where I can take what I've learned on all these trips and come home and sort of process it and digest it and put it back out there in what is hopefully like a helpful format to people who are planning their own trips, or maybe in that stage that I was where they're still trying to work up the courage to go and they need someone to say, hey, you can do it. It's okay. It's not that hard. You don't have to be confident. Like, here's some tips.
You don't need confidence. You just need to read exploringwild.com. You can borrow my confidence the same way that you borrowed other people's confidence.
Exactly. And I try to, I think at some point I started getting feedback from readers that this was actually helping them. Like, they were nervous about something and they saw my site and it helps them feel confident, or it helped them choose their gear. And that's been motivation enough to keep it going. I think I try to, it's like a little bit of a different vibe from some of the bikepacking stuff that's out there. I mean, which I love. Like, I read all sorts of bikepacking media and it's all great. But I think having like a woman's perspective is a little bit different, and just this perspective of sort of, you don't need I do have a fair amount of like nice gear at this point, but in the beginning I was like, you don't need all this fancy stuff and you can do it anyway. And it's okay if you don't feel totally confident. Like, I just try not to take it too seriously, I think. And that seems to resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah. I do think that's one thing I wanted to touch on. I do think that your approach to, tips, gear reviews, trip reports, you give a very honest assessment of whatever you're talking about. And I know this about you and your website, and I think that this is an important caveat, is that, nothing on your site is paid. You're not in anybody's pocket, so to speak. Like, you don't have any affiliation or obligation to any company or anything, which really gives you a lot of, the independence to give that truthful take on whatever it is, And so I think that that's a really refreshing and valuable, part of what you're doing. That's been one of my takeaways.
Thank you. Yeah, I've worked hard to keep it that way. I sort of learned early on in the world of internet publishing that there will be people who reach out and, offer to pay you to to put things on your website. And it just that kind of thing just never felt right to me. So yeah, I do at this point, I will like test sample gear if it's something that I feel like is like could really have a place in my setup and could really be interesting to readers. But it's always like very much in no strings attached. Like, I could say anything I want about it, or nothing at all, like type of situation. So yeah, I've worked really hard to try to keep it really independent and unbiased. Yeah.
And not only that, but the information, like, you are just a very detailed and thorough person. I think it's probably like in your wheelhouse as a skill set that you have. And that translates into just a very well thought out and, just easy to read, easy to ingest information on whatever the topic is you're covering. So I really do think that your website carries with it a lot of value. I definitely want to point people to it. And before we get into all my questions, I have one that's just a professional curiosity question, but I am genuinely like surprised with and shocked with like how much information, how many articles, how many categories, from travel to backpacking to bikes, and then all the subcategories. Like, there's just so much. Like, people when they go to your website, they'll be like, holy shit, there's a lot of information here. My question is like, how much are you working on this, like, on a daily basis? Is this kind of like your job? Is this what you're doing every day? Is like, okay, today I'm going to work on an article. Like, how much are you working on this website?
Quite a bit, especially during the periods that I'm home. It is like a full-time job sometimes, or it's a full-time job in terms of time. It doesn't pay like a full-time job, unfortunately, but but I love it so much. I've been sort of trying to make it into more of a full-time job when I can. But yeah, I mean, as you know, it's not even just writing. There's so much that goes into maintaining a website and a little business. And yeah, I have an endless list of things that I want to write about. Every time I go on a trip, the list just grows. I just get more ideas. It can be an endless black hole of time if I let it, for sure. But it's fun. I like working on it almost all the time, so it's all right.
How often do you publish a new post, a new topic, a new article, whatever? Like, how frequently are you adding something new to the website? Because from my perception, it seems like almost daily, or at least a couple times a week or something. And maybe that's just my internet algorithm feeding me more often. I'm not really sure. But...
yeah, once a week is sort of my goal. I would love to publish like both a bikepacking and a backpacking article each week. In practice, I tend to neglect the backpacking and focus more on the bikepacking because that's just been like a greater piece of the pie for me lately. Yeah, once a week. I'll tend to batch it up, right? So if I can, I'll write a few of them and then schedule them out for the times when I'm not available or when I'm actually out bikepacking and can't write about it. But it just depends. It's ebbed and flowed over the years.
Yeah. No, it's really amazing. I'm very impressed and kind of awestruck by your diligence, and your attrition to just keep it up. And it really has become something very, very impressive and helpful tool. So let's dig into some topics. I just picked a handful of topics that I think could be interesting, stuff we've covered before, stuff we haven't, and wanted to just dive into a few different topics. So let's get to it. So a couple things that we hear, right? Like phrases that are common that you hear all the time is the right bike is the bike you already own, and you don't need all the fancy gear, just go. So you've already kind of touched on this, but what is your thoughts and response to those phrases that we commonly hear?
Yes, I think it's important to consider who you're talking to. So I tend to divide this up into like two groups, right? So the best bikepacking bike is the one that's in your garage, right? Like fantastic phrase. We all love to tell that to people. And if you're someone who has never been bikepacking before, right? So like you've heard about this thing, you think it's a cool idea, but you've never actually like pedaled somewhere and spent the night there and pedaled back. Then like, yes, 100%. Like any bike, take any bike, take a 40-liter backpack and like strap a tent to the handlebars and like go pedal somewhere and sleep there, right? And repeat, like absolutely. And I've seen too many people. I get a lot of questions from readers, so I have some insight into like what's going on in people's heads. And I do see too many people who like fall down the rabbit hole of all the gear before they've even started doing the thing. And it's like the risk there is just, obviously spend a lot of money on something that then turns out to not be quite as sticky as maybe you thought it would be when you were just reading about it. So I always recommend, like, if you're just starting out, absolutely, the best bike is the one that you already own, and do not let anything get in the way, bike or gear, of trying it out. And I think through that process, people figure out whether this is something they want to do more of, and if so, whether they want to do the same kind or a different kind, whether they like bike paths and campgrounds, or whether they kind of want to get out there a little bit more, whether they want gravel or whether they want trails. Like, so I think the next evolution is for someone who actually rides a bike already, like is a cyclist of any genre, or has already done a little bit of touring or like light bike camping. What's the best bike for bikepacking? Like, yeah, you want some real guidance there. You're going to spend some money on a bike. So at that point, I try to get people to sort of picture like what type of bikepacking really captures their imagination. Like, what does bikepacking look like to you in your mind? Is it like gravel roads? Is there resupply? Is it campgrounds? Or is it like absolute middle of nowhere, like burly hike bikes and gnarly trails and like maybe no cars around, and because these are like very different vibes. Some appeal more to one person than another, and they also obviously like will have different bikes that will make them more comfortable and fun. Like you can ride any bike on any of these things, right? And like I suggest that people do in the beginning, because you don't know if you like a certain type of bike packing until you try it. The challenge is then trying to find like what's going to be the most versatile platform for the ways that your bikepacking interests are going to evolve in the future. As for gear, that's a whole other story. But like, yeah, you definitely don't need all this fancy gear. My setup has evolved and upgraded over the years, but like, and I did buy myself a nice touring setup. I will say, like, I bought my long haul trucker Surly, and then a pair of Ortlieb panniers for Southeast Asia, and like that was great. But then when I started bikepacking off road, I was like using the same bike, using like a touring bike to ride, trails and dirt roads, and like stuffed some 2-inch tires in there. I had to like deflate them to get them between like the rim brake pads, just like working that setup like as far as I possibly could. And I think probably I bike packed a good, 1,000 miles before I actually finally bought like a bikepacking bike and bags and all of that stuff. So you also don't need to rush into that, I would say. Like, don't let that hold you back.
Yeah. I do think that this is one of the greatest problems that we in the biz can help is bridging the gap between, I'm starting off and I want to go, but what bike, what gear, and it's complicated. There's so many factors that go into it. What you keep saying and what I can echo from my own experience is like, at this stage, I've got a arsenal of bikes and gear and hammocks and bivvies and tents and all this, but I didn't start there. Like, I think it takes a long time, and I think that's a good message for people is like, it's okay to not start with all the exact right gear. And honestly, like, not having all the right gear, underbiking is a thing, right? Like, and the funny thing about all this is like, for me, I've gone in stages where like, start off with kind of, I rode a carbon road bike, like a race road bike with 28C tires on my first bike packing trip on a gravel road, like not the right bike for, and my partner at the time rode a full suspension mountain bike, like, so not riding the right gear. And then like I think a lot of people do where you just get all the stuff. But now I'm at the stage in bike packing where I try to take as little as possible. I actually prefer minimalism as a way to enhance the experience, where like I'm trying to not take stuff. And I think when you don't have stuff, it kind of adds to the adventure. You're forced to, play with whatever gear you have. And if you didn't bring the right thing for this weather, well, then it's just going to be more of an adventure. So I've kind of swayed back into like, having less is more kind of thing and focusing more on the adventure. So anyway, yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I used to really kind of take pride in actually like not having the right stuff. I will say it was sort of a weird transition for me when I actually did start to accumulate a more traditional set of bikepacking gear. Like I almost had to like get used to it, because I had fun sort of showing up to, like smoke and fire, like the race in Idaho, with a touring bike with like bar and shifters and like just, it was kind of my thing. Like I underbiked with like a really scrappy setup and felt comfortable with that identity kind of. I don't know. It was probably a bit of like imposter syndrome too, right? So then once I had the stuff, it's like, oh, now I have to live up to that. Be a real bikepacker. But the good stuff helps, it's helped expand the range of what I could ride comfortably and confidently for sure. It's good stuff. But yeah, I think it's important for people to remember, like those of us who were writing and talking about this stuff, like the reason we're doing it is because we're like deep into this, like really into it. And
right,
we're specialists. We are like, the top, I don't know what percent of 5%, 1% or whatever of like people who are obsessed with this thing. So like, of course, we have we have some gear in our garages or our sheds, but like, yeah, most of us didn't start that way. And it's not like you need that to get started. I rode for years without the right gear.
Yeah, let's touch on this a little bit more too, because I would like to get your perspective. Mine is that this community, and specifically, let's say the bike packing and even bike pack racing community here in the United States, to get real specific, because that's what I'm familiar with. Almost like, not only is it okay to show up under biking on like a unique setup, but it's almost like revered in a certain way. Like we have respect. Like if you show up with like, I don't know. I mean, I remember like Ozark Doom, a guy was riding a mountain bike, like full suspension mountain bike with exactly what you said, a 40-liter huge backpack. He didn't have a single bag on his bike, and he's doing 400 miles in Ozark Doom. And I'm like, yes, awesome. Go get it, man. However you want to do it. That's always been my impression from somebody is like showing up with the bar and shifters on the Surly Long Haul Truckler and under biking. Do you also think that this community is like receptive and open to that as being like kind of cool and totally fine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's a supportive community to begin with. That's one of the things that I've always liked about it. But like, yes, that in particular immediately became clear that I was like I felt kind of insecure about my setup, but it was actually a bonus because people thought it was like memorable and cool that I was showing up anyway. So yeah, definitely.
Which I think is cool. Like you always, you hear about certain, I mean, just groups and certain sectors of cyclists that are, you got to have the right kit and the right bike, and there can be some pressure to conform, and that's one thing I just really love, and I think is going to allow this community to grow is by just show up. Like nobody's going to judge you for like your bike or your gear. We're all out there for an experience. Come and do it any way you want to. And this community is really receptive to that, which I think is great. I love that about this community.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what else. All right. Next on the hit list. So we've seen an emergence in panniers, for bike packing. Obviously, it's been a thing for bike touring forever. But what are your thoughts on panniers for bike packing versus the traditional bike bags? And yeah, anyway, I was going to add a caveat, but I'm just going to let you answer
it. Yeah, I mean, I've gone full circle, right? Because I started bike touring with like the classic Ortlieb rear panniers, where you just throw everything in and they're huge. And then when I got more into like off pavement riding trails, it definitely became about like, let's get these tiny little bags and put them all over the place. And everything's wedges and cylinders, and it's like a much more complicated way to pack your bike, but it's great because, well, I mean, especially like if you're hike-a-biking, which a lot of the routes that I do tend to have, or maybe I'm just like not strong enough to ride up the hills, but I feel like I'm always hiking my bike, and panniers, they get in the way. I'm sure people who've used them have noticed that. That's like one of my favorite things about bike packing bags, is that they're not in the way. They are a bit lighter, usually, and they just encourage you to pack in a more minimalist way generally, because you don't have the opportunity to just like throw one more thing in the top, So I transitioned fully to bike packing bags for quite a while, and then more recently actually went back to panniers for some of these longer international trips that were more like off pavement, off road focused, but a bit longer. So like a month in Central Asia or 2 months in Morocco and Portugal. I just felt like I needed more stuff than I could fit in a bike packing bag setup, especially being a smaller rider. Like my bike packing bag space is a bit limited. So I switched back to rear panniers for that type of trip, but I think it's important to, like these days especially, there are some great bike packing specific panniers which have soft attachment systems. So I use, I think they're called the Link panniers from REI, just REI brand panniers, and they have a soft Velcro strap attachment system so they don't rattle, and there's like no way that it could ever break, really. So you don't have to worry about like plastic parts on like really rough off pavement terrain. And they're a bit smaller, and they have compression straps, so you can sort of snug them in, and they're a little bit more out of the way than traditional panniers. So I've been back to recommending panniers a little bit more to people who either just can't fit much on their bike in bags, or just need a little more space.
Yeah. That's a great segue. Let's get into the next question that I had, which was about, shorter riders. It's one of the questions I hear the most, and I mean it's just a space thing. A smaller frame, you're not going to have the clearance between the seat and the tire for a seat bag, and your frame size is smaller. So first off, as a starting point, you mentioned you're on the shorter side. How tall are you? Don't mean to call you out, but how tall are you? And I'm curious, like, at what height do you think that space and storage becomes a problem if you have that metric?
Yeah, so I'm fairly lucky. I think I'm 5'5", right, which is not super short for women. I actually think sort of the height at which it starts to become an issue is like exactly right around my height. I don't know. That's just
you're right on
my personal perspective. I'm like right on the border. So especially with 29-inch wheels, right? So I sort of always wanted to go to like 27.5, but the bikes that I buy just keep ending up being 29ers. Like I actually had more bike packing bag space on my long haul trucker when I first started, because it's got 26-inch wheels, which solves a lot of problems. But on 29er bikes, I ride a size small frame, and especially like my frame triangle is pretty small. I remember parking my bike once next to like an extra large size cutthroat. It's also a cutthroat bike, and this guy just had like the most cavernous frame bag I've ever seen. I mean, I think everything I was carrying could have fit in his frame bag alone. And I was so jealous of all his frame bag space. But yeah, so my frame bag is like quite limited. And then I can put a full-size seat bag in the rear, but I have to be quite careful about how I pack it. There can't be any drooping or flopping or anything like that. It has to be packed pretty tight. And then same with the front, like a big, like a harness with a dry bag and a tent in there. If I'm not careful about how I strap it, can buzz the front tire. And then that's just with a fully rigid bike, which actually...
Yeah, I was about to say with suspension, that changes all that.
Yeah. And that's something I've been gradually being drawn towards, more mountain biking and rugged routes, just because I really like, being out there. But then figuring out how to get the bike handling skills to go with it, and then also the gear. So that's the direction that I've been evolving in lately. And yeah, so adding a suspension fork, for sure, I have to choose like a narrower diameter dry bag for the harness, and I can't put like a tent up there too. I have to find other places for that. And then recently, like within the last year, started riding with a dropper seat post in the rear, and with that back there, I can actually fit like a tiny little 5-liter seat bag back there with my fairly short travel dropper, but like just barely. And that only works, I mean, that's tiny, and like I do that for races, but for like a more casual trip, I can't fit everything I need to be comfortable in that setup. So what I've started doing for a setup like that is, first of all, a backpack. It's not my favorite. I don't want to do it for really long trips, but like for a race where I'm just out for a few days, for sure, I'll put a few liters of water in a backpack. Maybe even like a sleep kit, like for some races, I have like a tiny little inflatable sleeping pad, and I'll just like literally I can fit everything but my sleeping bag or my sleep kit in there, and a couple days of food and some water, and that takes a lot of strain off the bike setup. I've recently been trying to do more casual trips where I need to carry a bit more stuff with a hardtail setup with a dropper post, and that has been probably like the best test of this short person gear strategy, right? So I finally had to switch back to a rack. So there's a few, like in the back right now, I'm using an Old Man Mountain Elkhorn. Those are super popular these days, but I find that to be a really nice middle ground. So instead of panniers, it takes cargo cages, and you can just strap like some dry bags back there. It's almost like having two forks, so you can like put the fork cages on the front and then more fork cages on the back and strap a little something to the deck. Then with that setup, I can actually use my dropper post, but still carry like a reasonable amount of stuff. And same for the front, those racks can go on the front too, and then loading up the fork cages. Yeah, it's tough. There's so many different ways to do it. I feel for people, especially who ride like small full suspension and mountain bikes, like you can't carry anything on there without a rack. Fortunately, there are more options these days.
Yeah, there are, and you touched on a couple of the ones that I'm personally interested in and was going to ask you about specifically, which is because I just did attempted the AZT, and so it was my first time. Might have been my first time bike packing on a full suspension bike. I think it might have been. I don't have the terrain around here to really justify it, and I've always kind of preferred hardtails. But like that trail not for everybody, but that trail certainly justifies the use of a full suspension bike. And so I ran the Old Man Mountain Elkhorn rack on the rear, with a dry bag just strapped to the top. Obviously, like you said, it's got the mounting points on the side. I didn't need to use those because I didn't need to carry that much gear. But and then on the front, I used the Old Man Mountain axle pack, which allows you to turn a suspension fork into mounting points. So then you can now carry gear on your fork. And I'm thinking that's one of the questions I have for you is like, how well does that setup work on a shorter frame or a shorter full suspension frame specifically? Because for me it worked. Like I was shocked at how well it worked. I was a little worried because it was my first time bike packing with a rack actually too. I've never used a rack. I've always had traditional bike packing bags. So like I was doing all kinds of new stuff on the AZT, and I was blown away by how well it all worked. But yeah, what's been your experience? Does that system transfer or translate for shorter riders as well?
Yeah. I actually have like the exact same setup on my hardtail. For the last trip, I used the axle pack in front too. It definitely works. It works really well. I think so. The one thing I would ask you this maybe because I'm still working on my mountain biking skills. But for me, there's like this weird crossover point where like if it's not that technical, I just use a rigid fork because I'm classically an under biker. So if I'm putting my suspension fork on there, it's because I need some help with like riding over and around rocks and things like that. And if I'm doing that, then the less weight on the front the better. So like the only issue I had with that setup is just that like if I was trying to ride something really technical, it would seem like putting that much weight on the front like was not ideal, but I don't know, maybe people who are better mountain bikers than me can make that work.
I mean, maybe technical prowess has something to do with it. I think that certainly it does. I also wonder I weigh 180 pounds and I'm in the gym 4 days a week. And so I think that just by genetics or whatever, I probably manage that weight better than you might, just from a stature standpoint. So I don't think it's affecting me. It's having a greater input on what I'm experiencing. I definitely notice it, and I don't think anyone likes weight on their front suspension. I think that's just kind of universal. But then also you want to have the balance, right, of weight on the front and back. And so that, to kind of answer your question, like what I did was I tried to put as much weight, in the center of the frame and lower gravity as possible. And then from there, between the front and the back, I kind of erred on putting a little bit more weight on the rear versus the front to keep the handling as good as it could be. That was my approach.
That makes sense. Yeah, the total bike weight is just a much greater percentage of my body weight, so I probably have to like muscle it around a bit more. But yeah, I think for sure, like if you're one of those people, like you have a hardtail and you just like ride that hardtail everywhere, like like a hardtail on the Great Divide type of ride, or like a like, yeah, you could put the axle pack on there and load it up. And it's great actually because the weight isn't on the bars. So you don't have to worry about like adjusting your suspension. It's down low, which is nice too. Yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff about it for sure. For me, I have to be mindful of like, if I'm riding a bike with suspension for the technical help, then like I really have to be careful how much weight I put on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's super.
It's a great system.
Yeah, no, this is good. And this is why it's good to ask other people, because I don't experience that to the degree that you do. So it's good to get that perspective, because it's not something that's as easily identifiable for me. So that's great. Well, let's touch on a topic that is outside of gear. I mean, we could spend so much time talking about gear. There's so much of it. And again, go to exploringwild.com. This is not an ad. I'm just your friend, and I think it's a great resource, and people should check it out for sure. But one of the things that you do have experience with is being in a relationship with somebody who's also adventurous, and y'all do stuff from time to time. But you have done a lot of this stuff on your own as a solo female who's also in a happy and healthy marriage, and you're maintaining all that. And so like, I'm wondering if you can speak to like, how you've been able to manage being in a relationship, and being the more adventurous person. And I don't know, maybe some of the highs and lows, the tips, like what has your experience been like there? And what would you share with other people who are in similar types of relationships?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting point because it's sort of unlikely that like two people in any relationship are going to have exactly the same amount of enthusiasm for this crazy sport. And it's fairly all consuming, right? It's not like, oh, we have our separate hobbies and, one person gardens and the other person like reads, or it's like, this is all consuming, right?
So, those are such great points. I just like, you nailed, whenever I was rehearsing this question in my head, I meant to have both those caveats, but like, it is difficult to find somebody that's equally as passionate. Like you might be like, oh yeah, I like to do that every once in a while, but it's not equal. Like one person might be really into it. Anyway, go ahead. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's evolved for us, right? So we, when we got married, I was like this tech-focused career woman, right? It's like a great bait and switch. Like I didn't discover any of this until years after we got married. So it's been an evolution. In the beginning, obviously, as we were talking about before, I just went on my own, which was a bit non-standard. And I think that only worked for us because we're both pretty independent people. We're both like just okay doing our own thing for a while. So I'd go away for a month here, 2 months there. He would stay home and do his thing. And that worked. It's kind of fun. We had great stories to tell each other when we got back together. But I think like that type of home away ratio doesn't work indefinitely for most people. Like that kind of became true for us. Was at some point I became less interested in going away for months at a time. And like, it got harder and harder to feel like I was really putting enough energy into my home life when I was only home for a few months and then leaving again. So at some point a lot of things happened. He got to a point with his career where he could take a little bit more time off. And I think by that he could see that like, I wasn't messing around with this bikepacking thing. Like this wasn't just a passing
it wasn't phase, a phase,
Yeah. Like this one was here to stay. And so he's actually, like, to be clear, he is an adventurous athletic person. He's highly capable. It's almost like annoying how capable he can be with these things when he doesn't train, or he's one of those people who can just kind of like come along and make it work. And I'm very thankful for that because that's allowed us to take some great trips together. So when he was able to take a few weeks or a month off from work, we did Central Asia together. That was, I think, 5 weeks, right? So we've taken some really great trips together. They're different, very different from solo trips, like totally different basket of pros and cons, I would say. Like, just to summarize that, it feels like they're less interactive with the local people because we're sort of like traveling in our own little bubble. And so it's a little bit less of like crazy, wild, unexpected things happening all the time. I like a little more predictable to travel with a partner, but also just so much more relaxing for me. Like I'm not constantly hyper vigilant. It's much more comfortable. It's not as big of like a mental strain for me. And it's just a lot of fun to like have those experiences to share. So he's my adventure buddy. That's great. But we realized through taking those trips that his bikepacking attention span is just shorter. That's kind of the way I like to put it. Like he likes it, but there's so many other things he likes too. And his interests are often like technology based. So to take him away from a computer for a month or two is like kind of hard for him because he likes to tinker with software. And he likes outdoor sports, but he tends to prefer the more like faster paced action sports. Like he loves skiing. We both ski, but he's a little more enthusiastic about it, I would say. And he loves surfing. And so we've been having luck lately with these like hybrid trips. So we did this in Morocco and Portugal, where we flew with our bikes. We left the bikes at a hotel. We took a bus down to Western Sahara, and we spent a week taking kiteboarding lessons. So that was like something totally for him. He loved that. I found it a little stressful, to be honest. I'm more of a slower paced activities kind of person.
My fault.
I don't think that's
as soon as yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, that's how I felt. It was cool, but just like, I don't know, very high stimulation for me, just like a little too much going on at once. But he loved it. We did that for a week. Then we took the bus back and did like a month of bike packing. And then we went to Portugal and sort of bike packed between towns, and he surfed at a few of the towns. And so that worked pretty well. And then probably our most successful compromise trip yet was the Cape Loop in at the southern end of the Baja Divide. We did that in January, and it was like this really nice mix. We like bike packed a couple days and then went surfing, and bike packed a couple days and then like kiteboarding, and like a couple more days and snorkeling. So I think we're going to someday run out of places where there's like really good bike packing adjacent to ocean sports. But for right now, that's working for us. The key is just like everyone has their own preferences, and bike packing takes a ton of time, right? And it is a lot of time just on the bike. And if you like other things or you get kind of bored with that, then it can be really rough. So just trying to talk about like how we can each get what we're looking for out of a trip has helped us a lot.
Yeah, I can relate to that quite a bit. I mean, Natalie, her thing is surfing, like number one, surfing. For me, surfing is like anxiety inducing, scary, hard, and doesn't appeal to me anywhere close to the level that, you know, riding a bike does, you know. And so but like also I love to experience the world. I like to try new things. I like to be outside. And so there's a lot about surfing that I can like get behind, you know, and it's, and like circling back to the conversation we were having earlier about fear and not letting fear dictate your life, I think is important. So yes, I'm kind of afraid of surfing, but it's also important to me to like not let that fear conquer me, and to like go out there and to still do it. And so like I think like one thing I've learned is learning to take joy in like what the other person is doing, even though it's not like the tip of the iceberg. There's still a lot of like good things and like fun things and adventurous things and learning and all this stuff that you're gonna get from experiencing that other thing. And I think that is good. And then like you said, I think just, you know, compromise on communication, be like, okay, well, like we're actually planning a bike packing trip to Oaxaca this December. And so that's more in my realm. She's excited. Like she wants to bike pack and she loves it, but it's like my thing, the way surfing is her thing. Right. And so we just dip our toes in each other's waters and kind of like try to find like some balance and good communication and all that, you know. I think that's good. I had one other thought. Oh, the other thing you touched on at the very first part is you're like, and we have good things to talk about or fun things to talk about. And like, I'd like to touch on that just a little bit more, because like Natalie and I are in a long distance I mean, she lives an hour and a half away, so it's like semi long distance. We see each other twice a month. Like we don't, you know, we're not cohabitating or seeing each other a whole lot. And she goes on her trips and I go on my trips, and and when we hang out when we can, and it's great, and we're happy, and like this works for us. But like one of the things that we really value, and that's kind of interesting, is that it kind of, you get the opportunity to miss the other person, which you could like have a negative stance on. It's like, oh, I miss them, which could be negative, but it's also like I lean into like, I want to be in a relationship where I miss that person. It's like, it feels good to care about and love somebody enough to miss them when they're gone, and to like, then you're back together, and you get to be excited to see that person again. And then you have all these stories to tell. It's like, we didn't do all the same things. So now I'm telling you about my trip, and you're telling me about your trip, and we're getting to like have this more exciting, engaged moment, and we're reunited. And so we actually are like quite enjoying that. And our relationship is quite a bit different than yours in many ways. But I wonder if you could, it's a little bit personal, but I wonder if you could speak to that aspect of like managing a relationship and that dynamic in a relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, we've been together 14 years, married almost 10 coming up. And I totally agree that I mean, yeah, I'm a pretty self-sufficient person, right? So I don't easily get homesick. I don't easily miss people. And I have come to actually like really cherish those moments where I'm out alone somewhere on a bike trip and like thinking fondly of home and of my partner. And like, yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like I wish I could like bottle that and take it home, and keep it here for when we've been like in the same house for, a month, and things aren't quite as exciting anymore as like when I first got home and we had all the stories to tell. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. Like, they say absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? I think there's some truth in that. And then just maintaining like different like individual identities in our lives, right? I think that's important for anyone in a long-term relationship. I mean, it's kind of wild. Like we go to these amazing places together, and we have these incredible experiences, and it's like, it's fun to reminisce about them. But then at some point you're having dinner and it's like, oh man, yeah, this amazing thing happened. Like, what did you do today? Well, I rode my bike uphill for 20 miles. What did you do today? Well, I did the same. And like this amazing thing happened, halfway up the mountain. And like, you remember that guy on the horse with the goats? Oh yeah, I remember that. I was there. And it's like, you're experiencing wild stuff, but it's sane, which is simultaneously great because you have someone to like witness these special, exciting moments. But also like, it's kind of nice to just have some individual experiences and then get to kind of live vicariously through the other person, right? Because that's, to your point about like surfing versus biking, I'm the same way. I'm actually terrified of water sports. I don't know why. I'm a creature of the land, and he likes water, and it's just like mixes things up. Like that's one of the benefits of having another person beside you in life, is they're like an individual with their own interests, and their interests are going to spill over into your life and vice versa, and just like choose someone that's going to be a fun journey with.
Yeah, I love it. Good advice. Good adventurous dating advice from Patrick and Alissa. We'll open up the phone lines now to hear your questions. All right, that's good. Yeah, let's tie a bow on that little segment and move on to the next little topic here. Kind of closing out your Exploring Wild website. One of the things I noticed that you've started doing is making adventure kits, which I think is great. You've essentially, I don't want to take the words out of your mouth, but like, I think what you've done is take your years and miles and, you're traveling around the world and all these different places, and identified like, well, why don't you describe what it is? But essentially kits to help you with like the stuff that you need. That's what it looks like to me whenever I look at your website. But tell us about these, what do you call them? Adventure kits?
Yeah, that's the category right now, leaving room to evolve in the future. At this point, they're basically all bike packing kits, but I have dreams of adding, more backpacking focus or other things. But so after all these years of of building software and writing content, it just sort of feels good to like work with real physical things, right? So I just kind of got the itch to like create something real, physical, in the world that people could actually take with them, because I like this idea about exploring wild, that like I'm in a way like accompanying people on their trips in a sense, with the information, but I like the idea of being able to do that with actual physical things. So these kits the idea came to me while I was trying to restock some of my like repair and spares and emergency kits, and realizing that when I wanted to like I carry small numbers of things, but when I need to restock them, like years later, I might have like gone through a bunch and I need to restock. And the only way to do it is to buy like a 10 pack on Amazon or like a 50 pack. Like there are all these things so I learned a lot about how the distribution works, right? So a lot of these things are made in large quantities at the factory, and then like sellers on Amazon will buy them in bulk, but then sell them in like smaller quantities marked up, and there's just a lot of waste, right? Because then you go and you buy like a 6-pack of something when you only need one, or you buy like a whole roll of tape when you only want to carry like a little bit. And so it seemed wasteful and expensive, and I realized that like if I were able to sort of buy bulk quantities of all these things and divvy them up, then people could buy them at much lower prices and like not have all this stuff sitting around that they aren't going to carry. So that was the inspiration. The two that are specifically for bike packers right now, the tubeless tire repair kit is pretty easy to understand the purpose of. I think we all, worry about what happens out there if we get a puncture in our tubeless tire that doesn't seal. And there's sort of like these multiple lines of defense. You can put in a plug, or you could try to sew it, or you might have to glue it, or maybe you have to boot it, put a tube, and all these things that most of us have heard about, but like if we're lucky, haven't actually had to practice very much. And I used to carry like this old needle and dental floss, and like at some point I opened up my kit and realized that the needle was broken in half, and it wouldn't have worked anyway, and just all this stuff that we carry that we don't really like know what to do with. So this is a kit of like specially selected, tested supplies. Like the needles actually work, the thread is strong. There's a little instruction booklet in there that can walk you through if this is your first time having to sew a tire by the side of the road. It's got everything you need except the
instructions
pump,
too.
obviously. And yep. So, bring your own pump and sealant, but other than that, it's pretty much everything that you could need or want to fix a tubeless tire in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So that's the tubeless kit. The Fix-It kit I'm calling it the Fix-It kit basically because I didn't feel totally confident calling it like the oh shit kit, which was my original idea. And it kind of like gives a sense for it. It's all the other stuff. So it's the gear repair tape and the thread locker and the spare bottle cage bolts and like a few water tablets for like when you forget and your filter freezes overnight and you have to get to civilization with some clean drinking water. And there's like a mini little light because your batteries ran out, and a section of spare old recycled tube to shim that handlebar mounted gadget that's slipping, frame tape to like touch up that spot where your bags are rubbing on your frame that you didn't catch before you left on your trip. It's just an assortment of little things, all of which I have needed and used on the road at various points. And people don't always think to carry until they have the experience. And then the third one is not specifically bikepacking focused, but it's an assortment of very small containers, bottles, baggies, and little like lotion pots for basically like carrying the right amount of consumables, because those like 3-ounce travel bottles are actually too big if you're trying to pack light. So if you want to bring like less than an ounce of something, basically it's hard to find such small containers. Again, you could go on Amazon and buy like 50 of them, but it's kind of hard to find just the right number, like if you don't need 50 and you don't want all that waste sitting around. So it's small containers that you can use for your sunscreen, bug spray, chain lube, specialty face lotion, whatever it is that you need to carry out there to pack lighter.
Yeah. No, that's actually like super valid. Those are all things like just like practical and useful things that people actually need when they're, backpacking or bikepacking or whatever it may be, um, made and curated by somebody with experience. Like, you're not just like throwing stuff in a bag and calling it good. Like, you're like, oh no, this stuff works. I've tried it. This is what I actually need. This is like, oh, I'm sure you're just like on a trip and you're like, oh, freak, I should have had more frame tape. I wish I had some frame tape. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I'll add that to the kit. It's like, it's practical things. I just want to voice a strong vote for calling it the oh shit kit. And I think to increase engagement with this episode, please leave a comment wherever you hear this and cast your vote for how we should name. Alissa didn't ask for this, but I'm asking for it.
Fair enough.
Should it be the fix it kit or the fix it kit or oh shit kit? I just have a feeling oh shit kit. I think you're going to attract more buyers than you're going to turn away from it from a marketing standpoint. I think it's brilliant. So, and it speaks to it actually like is a better descriptor of what it is if we're being accurate. Because like fix it, yeah, okay, it's a fix it. Fix it could be broad, it could be a tire, it could be a bike, it could be a boat. Like, what are we fixing? But an oh shit kit is like, okay, I'm in trouble. Fuck, I didn't think to pack this. Oh shit, let me check my oh shit kit. Oh shit, there's one in there. Like, that's your whole marketing thing. It's brilliant. It's so good. So that's my note.
Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, I'm not very good at marketing and promotion, so I'll take that into consideration.
I don't know if I am either. I'm just throwing ideas out there. Well, one thing you are good at is creating websites, and you're good at a lot of things. But just as a segue, because Exploring Wild is not the only website that you build and manage. You have an entirely other project called Bike Sleep Bike that I alluded to at the beginning of the episode. That's a completely different beast. So yeah, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to like introduce that website to the audience, and that way, people can be more aware of it and engage with it. So like, tell us a little bit about it.
Thanks. Yeah. This is it's like a side project to my side project. It's totally just a labor of love. But I want people to know about it because I think it might be helpful. So it's essentially a directory of bike travel trip reports on people's personal websites. So most people probably know about Crazy Guy on a Bike, where people can post their trip journals if they don't have their own website. But there's enough of us out there these days who got excited about building websites. And there's a lot of like long-term bike travelers who actually maintain their own websites, and they're great at writing trip reports about them and full of useful information, but they're not very great at like optimizing their websites so that you can find them through search engines, which is an unfortunate reality of being on the web these days. So Bike Sleep Bike, you can go there if you're wanting to research a trip or just want inspiration. It's a directory of posts on these blogs. So like someone goes and writes a post about biking through Cambodia, and then they can come, or you can come, anyone can come submit a post to the site. It just gets tagged with the country, the style of riding, so like pavement, gravel, trail, that kind of thing. Some identifying information to make it easy to find later in terms of like the style and the place. And then it goes into the catalog, and everyone else can come there and filter, I want to see trips about or posts about road touring in Asia, or I want to find routes or inspiration for like mountain biking based trail type routes in the US, or, the Western US or Oregon, or like it gets quite specific. So I would love for more people to both contribute and just use it as a resource. It's totally free. Just go there and search for what you're looking for. And if you maintain your own website, please come submit it.
Amazing. That's actually a brilliant idea, Alissa. I didn't pick up on the genius of it right offhand, but like it really speaks to like you started Exploring Wild as a way to pay it back to the community, to all the people who went on trips and wrote about it that helped inspire and like give you the courage to like go out there and travel and do these things. So you wanted to put it on the web, but most people don't have the technical prowess that you have in actually, competing, like having a website compete in today's like e-market, right? And like, how do you get this story actually visible on Google? Like that's the real problem. Like anybody can write and put out an amazing thing, but how does it get seen? That's the big problem that you're solving here, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Instead of other people having to build, manage, work on I don't even know, like analytics and SEO and like all the stuff that goes into like running a website, you just give people a platform, well, for two things. One, to submit those articles, because there's a lot of people that are like you and like me. I mean, why do I host a podcast? I'm paying it forward. I'm wanting to get other people outside on the bike doing cool things, right? So like there are a lot of people in this world that want to offer their voice, their advice, their experience to a broader audience, and you're giving people a way to do that, as well as on the flip side for people to have a resource to gain more information about different trips and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Just trying to link up the people who went there and poured their hearts into these resources with the people who want to go there, want to learn about it, want to be inspired by it.
That is so, I didn't pick up on that. I was like, oh, this is a cool resource, but it was kind of, I didn't quite realize the full value of kind of the more technical side of all that I think people just don't even think about. They're like, oh, I'm going to write a blog about this. It's like, okay, cool. No one's going to read it. I mean, I don't want to be like dismissive or whatever and be like, oh, no, but it's hard to get Google to find your stuff. Like that's what it really comes down to.
No, it's true. And it's actually getting way harder. Like just to say a word about this real quick, like over the last 6 months, a lot of small websites and blogs have fallen further down the search results. No one's quite sure what's going on, but Google's been making a lot of changes to like promote more, the AI generated content, but then also like bigger media companies and forums. So if you feel like the small sites you used to follow are like have fallen off the face of the earth, you might just need to scroll a little further down, or like try a different search engine or something. But it is an interesting trend right now that's going on in the industry. It's getting harder and harder to create things as a small site and have people find them. So we just keep doing our best.
All right, Alissa, I think we did it. I think we checked all the boxes plus some other ones. Yeah. I thank you so much for coming on. We've been chatting about it for, I think, literally like 5 years. Yes. So I think we did it after 5 years. This is the biggest buildup, but we've done it. So I think we can tie a bow on it, and I'd love to get you back on some other time. We'll see what you think about the first one, and then we'll see if we get you back on some other time. But you are a wealth of information, and I think you're doing a lot of you're one of the unsung heroes, I think, in the bikepacking space, who not only has traveled extensively, has a vast array of experiences, but also like is doing a lot of work in trying to pay it forward through information, trips, tips, trip reports, and doing it in a really authentic and honest way. And so I do think you provide a ton of value to the community. And I'm really glad that we got you on the podcast today. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really nice to hear that. And yeah, it's been a long time coming. So I'm glad we finally did it. It's been great to talk.
Awesome. Check. We have checked that box. All right, Alissa, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again, probably about some computer problems or website problems I'm having.
Yeah. Probably time to do a little update on the website at some point. It's been a while, but yeah, I know you had to go like 15 minutes ago, so I'll let you sign off. But I may send you a thought or question or two by email later.
Okay, sounds good. We'll talk to you later.
Cool. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.